guess we do get some sunshine. I'm in here. I don't really see it. I don't know. I should go open those blinds or something, shouldn't I? If I do that, you won't see me. I'll get washed out.
You should put your desk where the couch is.
Maybe. You know what? I might just give my wife that go ahead. She'll just come in here on a Saturday and tear the whole thing up and a whole different office. If I took the camera and moved it around, you'd think I was a crazy person. I've got just caps and wires and then a lot of eccentric stuff that I like. But my office is pretty weird and messy.
It's because you got a lot going on, my friend.
Yeah, and I think when you spend a lot of time at work, you gotta add a few things that you like around the office that make you feel good. So then it doesn't have any theme at all.
So what you been up to? What's the latest on the book while we're waiting for everybody?
Oh, well, I just got back from a 15-year wedding anniversary in Mexico.
That's right. Happy anniversary, Joshua.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. Me and the missus just celebrated 15. That was a good accomplishment. Yep. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Well, it does feel like I've known her a lot longer than that. It's like I don't know. She's just kind of like a part of my life at this point where I wouldn't really know how to exist without her, anyways.
Do you think are your brain waves like synchronized?
You know, I've seen a bunch of different studies on this, and Jay will comment on it periodically. And you know, there's this mechanism of gamma, but there's also this mechanism of mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, you know, we only see them when they idle, so they're in sync with what other people are doing, and that's some deep process that we don't observe, at least not with the sensors that we're used to using. And we only see them when they're disengaged and idling really loud. But there are supposedly mechanisms where people can watch how they sync up with other people's brainwaves. And I don't know if that's a quantum mechanism like gamma or if that's something else. But there are other mechanisms of synchrony between people. Like there was an article or research paper that showed they followed people who played video games of all things. They went to this like high performing like Call of Duty team. They were like one of the best in the world. And they did brain maps, high level brain maps on these people while they were playing games. And they found that in the moment when they were synchronizing their efforts to eliminate the other team, even though they're in different rooms, playing this video game on the internet, their alpha waves were phase locked across space and time. So wrap your head around that one.
Anthony, two people playing a video game? Yeah, what's up?
Well, they were talking about how synchrony between people, you know, people study gamma, but the gamma is nestled in alpha, and how there's been studies on alpha phase locking between people, even in video games when they're coordinating their efforts across the internet.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Through an online game where they're not even in the same room or something.
Teams teams
That's
that are
pretty incredible.
Yeah, those first-person shooter games where they're coordinating their efforts. They're doing like the SWAT games. Their alpha waves across space and time are amplitude locked. The phase. Pretty wild.
That's incredible. Yeah, it reminds me of the brain synchrony studies. Like when you tell a story, your brainwaves become more synchronous with the storyteller. But this is even better because they're not in the same room. That's incredible. What'd you say?
Right. Well, I do like that example better though. So you're right. Maybe the brainwaves across, you know, time and space where they're not in the same room is like interesting, but the storytelling one is actually more interesting to me as a therapist. Like that's more primal and more like maybe down to our base nature of like stories are sub-experiential. Like for example, I can share an experience with you without actually having an experience with you by sharing stories. So we create realities that we can have shared experience with. That's really complicated. You don't think about that enough. That we can create something to experience together that isn't real, that creates shared experience that we didn't really share. And again, that's complicated.
Interesting.
Think about it for half a minute. Anyways, it looks like Radar Ash has a good question.
Yeah, does Josh want to take this one? This is good.
Yeah. So
here was my answer.
Yeah, 15 Miller liters for me. Yeah. Ouch. So brain fog, and I think that this comes down to the whole reason why we're passionate about what we do in QEEGs, is what causes brain fog for you. And that's the whole reason why we're not giving everybody a pill for brain fog. And it's like, here's your brain fog pill. You know, I got brain fog. They diagnosed me with brain fog, and I get the brain fog
an
pill.
IV.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then I'm good, because it isn't one thing, and that there's like a dozen different types. And if you don't identify the type correctly, you're going to have a pretty rough time trying to figure out what makes it feel better, because there's a lot of different causes. It feels like it's all the same, but it's not. It's just absolutely not the same at all. I don't know if that is a satisfactory answer, but it is kind of closer to the true answer, I think.
Mhm.
Is that
Now,
what a hangover is, though? But brain fog?
I mean, to you, but that raises another problem. Like what? I'll be even more facetious. Do we ever talk about it, like sensations, emotions, like what those even are?
No.
Like when you say brain fog, how do you know that when I say brain fog, I mean the same thing that you say when you say it?
Right.
Now, how do you know that when I say sad, that I mean the same thing that you say when you say sad? Or even anxiety.
Mhm.
Research actually shows that we're not talking about the same thing. We think we are. We're just projecting. And that those shared experiences are not actually shared experiences. Those are all constructs. There's got to
What
be a
about a
pattern
pattern?
over and over again for people that suffer with brain fog. So this is true. We'll say there's common patterns. So like I would say that the brain could be slowing down in some cases. Like if you don't eat, the brain slows down half a cycle per second. So the brain slows down half a hertz if you don't eat breakfast. Okay. People will feel brain fog if they skip breakfast. And so that slowed alpha, that slow edge of alpha, can be experienced as brain fog. And it can be induced in some people by skipping breakfast. And that could be one example of one type of brain fog that could be induced by meal skipping. But I would not say that that's going to make up a majority of the people who are using that word. That's going to make up, all the groups are going to make up, a minority, a small amount. They're not going to be more than 50%.
You know, I I like I like what you said, Josh. That there could be many reasons. Like I think I read that B12 can cause frontal slowing or lack of B12 rather.
Mhm.
So the same person could be multiple conditions.
Yeah.
I heard Nikki Whitridge thinks he thinks that our slowing might be lack of sleep. I didn't get to hear him elaborate, but I think potentially that's involved. We know that
Yeah.
it's involved in dementia, is sleep loss, and that's
Yeah.
associated with slowing.
Yeah.
Um, to this question that Radar is having, there has to be
Mhm.
some degree of shared experience. So I
Yes.
think I know what Josh is saying.
Yeah.
It's like, how do
Radar's
you
not wrong.
articulate? Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Radar's
It,
not wrong.
it it makes me think of. I'm
Mhm.
sure there are patterns and overlap. It makes me
Mhm.
think of there's this consciousness experiment, which is how do you describe the color red to a blind man? And
Mhm.
it's you can't do it almost. However, what I
Mhm.
will say is, um, a blind person is inherently somebody with a reduced sense of something. And
Yeah.
so I'm wondering if this has to do with people's sense of interoception or
Yeah.
internal awareness. One thing I heard recently is if you cannot feel an emotion in your body, it means something is wrong. And
Yes.
I know people who are, Josh, I know you've studied or worked on people with dissociation. I
Mhm.
know two
Yeah.
women in particular who they both had the same story. They said, I
Yes.
went to the doctor with pneumonia and he
Mhm.
asked me how I felt, and I said I didn't know. And they were
Yes.
later diagnosed with pneumonia. They couldn't even, one of them said the doctor asked me if I was congested, and I said I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
do think there is probably an overlap between people who lack awareness of
Well,
sensations, even,
and I would say that
emotions. Go on.
there's a difference between maybe the sensation of an emotion and maybe like the relationship to the sensation. Which, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
I would define anxiety as energy that we relate poorly to, specifically energy. And so you can kind of define anxiety as more the relationship to a sensation that is energetic. That might be getting closer. But to say that anxiety is a negative feeling in your body is definitely not specific enough for us to have shared experience at all. Not even close. But to say that it's a negative energetic sensation that we relate poorly to, that's not true. It's not a negative sensation. It's an energetic sensation we relate negatively to, because the negative aspects come from our relationship to that sensation. And it's hard to explain why, but that is true. There's a book on it, How We Make Emotions by Lisa Barrett. That book is pretty thorough, but also a very technical read if someone's very interested. So
at the same time,
it's very technical.
At the same time, I think I even was reading over my notes the other day, and Jay says that I think there was a moment on the podcast where he said, depression is maybe correlated with left frontal alpha. It's not just Jay that says that. I think there's papers that say that, and I think even sadness may be correlated. So there probably are overlapping relationships or patterns here. I will say some people don't experience certain emotions at all. I knew somebody who I knew in college, and they confided in me one day. I was talking on the phone with them, and I said, how you just get a little depressed sometimes because stuff's not working. He goes, no. I said, wait, what do you mean? I knew it was important. He said, I said, what do you mean you don't know what that's like? Don't you get depressed ever? He goes, no, I never get depressed. He goes, in fact, I have to tell you something. I haven't told anyone else this. He says, I am diagnosed with bipolar mania, and I take mood stabilizers so that I don't feel too high. Now that's an extreme example, but there are any psychiatric or condition you want to look up, there are subclinical examples, and they think that in some ways this might reflect underdiagnosis of some of these conditions. Like, who's to say on most psychiatric conditions, I think all of them, it's just, well, you have 5 of 7 things on the DSM. Well, what about the people with 4? Does that mean they don't have a problem? And the answer is, of course not.
It means it's not insurance's problem.
There you go. Yeah. And I know all the argument about, DSM is a construct and it's not valid. And but there probably are behaviors that are very common that are being touched on by these diagnoses. An OCD person may have repetitive behaviors, and that's a concrete thing that we can see with our eyes.
Obviously, schizophrenia is like a couple things. There's a couple things that are schizophrenia. We don't have them nailed down, but we know that there's obviously real things in here.
There's some overlap, and
when you look at ADHD, you're like, okay, there's a whole bunch of things in this box. I don't even know how many things. It's not like there's 5. There's like 13.
Oh wow.
There's a whole bunch of things that cause ADHD, so it's complicated. But then, do you ever notice that the DSM-1, 2, and 3, the first chapter was actually covered something called, what the phrase they used? The first chapter in the diagnosis, the DSM-1, 2, and 3 covered, they called it a descriptive adaptation. So it was a descriptive polysysm of the diagnostic medical manual. That's what they called it. Which means
I don't even know what that means.
We're co-opting this word in a descriptive manner, not a prescriptive manner.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay.
We're not using it as it was used intended, but we're using it differently as a descriptive adaptation of the medical model. And that's why it's not valid. That's why it's only it's valid that we're using it, but it's a construct. And there are things in there that you get a sense for, like there's something real in here, but there's also a lot of things that we made up.
Like it's not super specific, but there is some general mild correlations with a lot of them. Maybe you'd say.
Like we get Pam J here something like autism, right? There's something like autism, but it's probably made up of like 5 different things that we kind of group together.
As Jay would and Pineda would point out. And then Pam J, I just wanted to give her
welcome, Pam J.
A shout out. Yeah. I think she's talking about, we talked about brain fog, and she's saying there could be many physical causes: diabetes, nutrition, anemia, sleep deprivation, medication, Parkinson's, autoimmune. Yeah, I think actually I just saw a finding this week that low iron can sometimes create brain fog.
Oh yeah.
And I swear it might have, I know a hematologist, and I think he said it's something like 50% of women when they come in are anemic. And so it's probably a good idea anytime you're having any problem with your brain is to check some of these things out. Am I doing some basic self-care, so to speak here? Am I getting sleep and iron and et cetera? So.
Well, and for those of you that are kind of, neuro hackers or practitioners, there's something that my doctor friends that I meet with regularly are telling me that there's something different about ferritin levels than there is about iron levels. And that has to be checked separately. Somebody can have good iron levels and not good ferritin levels. And that
I think I've heard that.
And there's actually the range for what's an acceptable, what's considered low ferritin, they just cut it in half. So they just took the standard and said you can have twice as much as you used to have, and now it's a problem at twice the level. So they're starting to get more sensitive on that measure, and it's considered clinically relevant for medical prescribers. Now that's not my world, full disclosure, but the doctor friends that I meet with regularly are telling me this is really cool, really interesting, very exciting new stuff, and it does have a big impact on a lot of people for brain fog, relative to radar. And if you don't have something like ferritin, what are you going to get from something? What are you going to get from the other sources? It's really hard to work against low iron. My goodness, I try really hard not to work with people with certain kind of deficiencies. You can overcome a lot of deficiencies, but I'm not so sure about iron. I don't know that you can work around some of those problems. I'd rather just fix it. Yeah. So if I have a kid who's adopted and we don't know where they came from, I kind of say get a smart doctor and get a full blood workup before doing neuro, because there's a lot we don't know about them. Let's get to know the blood work really well, really thoroughly before we start neurofeedback. Yeah.
Anemia and gluten.
Yeah. Pam J says she thinks she had brain fog from anemia and gluten. And she changed and it cleared up. Yeah.
Gluten. If you have an issue with gluten, assuming that it's kind of a celiac spectrum issue, you also end up having issues with the gut-brain barrier. It tends to mess with the gut-brain barrier. You also want to stay away from oral GABA, L-theanine, because it will cross the blood-brain barrier, and it doesn't typically do that. You'll like it a little too much, and you don't want to be taking it for that reason. It's problematic. But it's also, if you're taking L-theanine and you really like it, don't, and go find a doctor who's functional integrative, because that means you got something going on potentially with the blood-brain barrier. That's what they tell me. So, but that can be an indication of gluten being the most common, not the only, but one of the more common things.
Radar says,
Radar says he trained his. He says, I had chronic brain fog and frontal training. Now, I know that not caused by poor catecholamine, I think that's, what is that, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. I'm not sure what he's getting at there. But what I'm thinking of, well, those things are affected by metabolism, so I don't know if that's why he's bringing that up. But yeah, Josh, do you want to field that one? Sorry.
See, chronic brain fog, chronic training, basically got rid of it because it was caused by poor catecholamine neurotransmission. I mean, I think it's great. I don't know what I would address other than frontal training. It sounds like something that could do that, which is great. If you have, it sounds like metabolic issues, or the frontal lobe training is a great place to start. I'm not a huge buff on neurotransmitters. I do large networks more or less. I'm listening to more Andrew Hill so I can, get a little bit of that. And then I'm trying to read some books on it, but it's a little bit above me. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about those experiences. Training the frontal lobe does tend to really help people with diet and control. More frontal lobe, more control.
Well, we're waiting for more questions. That means I have to come up with something. Any thoughts on the Tesla robots that are coming out? If we can put the triggers aside and talk about what the future looks like for the elderly, for 30 grand, you can have somebody keeping an eye on things. That's got to be good for mental health, to have somebody there or something. No?
That would be nice.
Joshua says no.
He doesn't like
it. I'm fine with it. Yeah, I think it's fine. I think that there's a lot of comedic talk about it replacing therapists, and I think it will probably replace some therapists, especially lower level, which is great. I'd like to raise the bar. I'd like to maybe standardize some things in mental health. To be blunt, we dump on neurofeedback for being poorly regulated, and rightfully so, but it's no more poorly regulated than psychotherapy. And we forget that. Like, really, truly, psychotherapy is just as bad. And if you don't know that, go see 3 therapists and you'll find out, because 2 of them are going to be terrible. So it's just how it is. So it's just mental health. It's as bad as our diagnostic manual.
To speak to that, the meta studies on CBT, for example, are saying 50% response rate. That means that they get any benefit at all, I think. That's generally what they say. And that means, it's a crapshoot a little bit. It's a dice roll whether you're going to get someone that's good. Let's see. He says frontal lobe training speeds up metabolism. Yeah, go on. Sorry, Josh.
No, you're good. The only studies that have been reproduced that I'm aware of, outside of maybe some CBT that triage out pretty much anyone with trauma, which who cares then, oh my gosh, because that's the only clients I see. So that's the problem, is if you do like trauma studies, EMDR and internal family systems seem to be the only thing that rivals CBT at all. And CBT efficacy drops dramatically when you include trauma. That's the problem. But if you're overlooking all that, we really, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I hear you on therapy effectiveness.
We therapy effectiveness. There are therapist attachment. So if you look at nothing, like if you're going to look at whatever you want, but the only thing that has been consistently across many different studies and many different research clinics correlated with consistent positive outcomes is rapport with the therapist. That's it. That's the only hard science for trauma.
Oh,
well, not just trauma.
The rapport is the deciding factor. You said
the strongest predictor for positive outcome is clinical rapport with the therapist. So if they like their therapist, that is the greatest predictor of them getting better, and everything else is secondary. Everything.
That's kind of cool. I mean,
that's chapter 1.
It's disappointing and also maybe encouraging at the same time. Was going to say real quick, Martijn Arns, he has a paper. I think he says that therapy works best with people with a slow alpha frequency. That's one of the things I want to mention. Is he calls it his brain marker I, and it's basically an index of your alpha speed. And if it's lower, he thinks therapy works better. I'll tell you, there's other research out there that I can send you. Midline frontal theta is the greatest predictor in the EEG of therapy success, according to this other study. So then Radar is saying here, I wanted to ask him, he says frontal lobe training speeds up metabolism, I believe, because it increases adrenal and thyroid activity. Radar, I wanted to ask you, I know last time I asked you what you were doing up front, and you said that suppression seemed to give you negative side effects. And so it sounded to me, and some of your other comments, that you're actually rewarding activity up front. And so I don't know if you're comfortable mentioning what were you rewarding, but I think that's interesting that it makes sense that brain's very metabolic. Maybe it is doing something to metabolism. I agree. Radar doesn't like therapy. And then Pam J says, neurofeedback helped my brain feel more focused. That is a great outcome, Pam. That's great.
And a pretty reliable one too. We do get that a lot. Yeah.
Depends.
Yeah. Depends.
Maybe it's clinic specific. I think I've had 3 clients in my whole career that we didn't see improvements in their CPT scores. So they're continuous performance testing. So you get like a test like this, like the TOVA, the Connors, or the Quick, or the, and you say click whenever you see the symbol. Don't click when you see this other symbol. Click it as fast as you can. I had 3 cases in my whole career that didn't show significant improvements. And one of them was a client who ended up being anemic. One of them had a REM sleep disorder. One of them had a really bizarre problem that we found out later that was like I can't mention it because it's too specific and too obscure. It's like
Sure.
one in the world, you know.
Yeah.
Usually there was a larger functional reason why they weren't responsive. Now, we didn't just use one type of neurofeedback. When we had non-responders, we would pivot to using a different kind of neurofeedback. So we kind of are of the opinion that if something isn't working for you, you know, you're doing the top up like SMR, try a bottom up like ILF, ISF. And so we do a little bit of like different montages that have shown evidence to help with attention. And we like to mix it up when we see we've got a non-learner.
That's good to know. Pam J says here, she says neurofeedback is the only treatment that reduced her anxiety from trauma. She tried therapy, EMDR, and DBT. I agree, good relationship with the therapist helps. Pam, I almost want to ask you, and no, no pressure. Was it? I'm going to guess that you did alpha down or alpha up at PZ is what I'm going to guess, a Severn style training. But we'll see if she knows. Maybe she does. I'd be curious, Pam, what kind of neurofeedback training you did is all.
Yeah.
But no worries. Go on. If Josh wants to speak to that.
Well, I think that's very predictive. Anthony knows the literature. When we have clients who have fast alpha, we don't see a reduced effectiveness for alpha training, but you might see a reduced effectiveness for talk therapy, like Martin Arn said.
Okay.
But we do see them do just fine in alpha training. I don't know what everybody else sees, but I sometimes see the alpha actually slow down a little bit. So we see some actual optimization. And this is kind of weird because it's not like other things where you've got this alpha asymmetry into the temporal, parietal, social perceptual issue over here. You're getting this alpha, this disengaged, and you train it down on the back of the head, and it becomes more centralized, and it tunes in again.
Wow.
It also can fix its speed. You can also see the coherence improve by 20% sometimes, and it's like, I didn't tell it to do all that. I didn't tell it to do all that. How to do all that? And some of us believe that when you train alpha down, you're just teaching the brain about alpha. And alpha is kind of like one of those weird bop it dolls. If you kind of mess with it, it'll just self-righten. And not every brainwave will do that at all. Not at all. But alpha seems to be able to correct itself and self-orient when you train it. And so you correct more than what you think you're correcting, which is pretty forgiving and pretty good, like pretty useful.
That's cool.
Question for you guys while we're waiting.
Sure.
What rewards do people use now? I'm hearing that videos and games and all that, people don't want to do that anymore. It's too distracting. Is that true? That sure hurts the marketing of neurofeedback.
Yeah, there might be a backlash against all the marketing. I think we have to see how it plays out. But I like simple feedback. Sometimes it seems to work better than flashy stuff.
What's simple feedback?
Beep, 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 beep.
Yeah.
But that's not sexy, Joshua.
Nope. It's cheap. And it's not about being cheap. It's about being effective.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing. If I've got an autistic kid who's low functioning, and there's a couple types of those, I want all things. I want all the bells and whistles because I need to negotiate with them. The only way that I can do training is if I can get them to sit and look at the screen and remain relaxed. And I need, MIDI tunes. Yeah. I can't get that with MIDI tunes with a low functioning autistic. But like with Radar is saying here, if you can tolerate a blinking light and if you can maintain proper vigilance throughout the whole training, some of us are wondering if that works better because your brain has nothing better to do than to associate that to its own behavior. And there's not 100 other things flashing around this relevant stimulus. I'm not saying that's the argument for why it does or doesn't work better, but it just does seem to work better. And so we've been verbalizing that, and some people are talking more and more about it. And I don't know if it's correct, but it's what we're doing. I'm choosing not to use my expensive software half the time.
Wow.
I have it. I have $200,000 in software that I'm not using. Why would I do that?
The ZooCore?
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, like what software are you sitting on? What's hot out there?
I have everything. I don't need it, but I have everything.
Cool.
Hey, Giannis, alphabet lore. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to the show.
Pam J has it. Yeah, it was the first she says she used Neuroptimal for 10 sessions to see if she could do neurofeedback. It helped reduce her anxiety. Then she found somebody who studied Sturman. Well, that's cool. We're very friendly here. I know Jay is Sturman acolyte, etc. Well, Pam, I'm just happy you got training that really helped you. That's wonderful. So,
and Pam, I've done some anecdotal fun stuff with Neuroptimal. I've done some little case studies, maybe a dozen pre-post brain maps on Neuroptimal. They're not too thrilled with it. I don't know why. The results were good. We're in the ethics review board to do a double-blind placebo-controlled study on Neuroptimal. Again, I don't know that people really want to see that for some reason, but we're going to do it anyways. I think it'll go well. So, because I get results with Neuroptimal systems when people request that. It's not like my go-to thing. I put it in a separate company because I don't consider it clinical.
Smart. Well, I'm surprised that they didn't like it. Yeah, Pete, sorry.
Yeah, I do think Radar's on a roll. I do think focus and attention can change the effect a little bit. When I started neurofeedback, I didn't understand that it was supposed to be passive, so I would intend the training to work it, and it worked. Amen, brother. Preach it.
Yes.
Pam J, he did a few weeks, but then had to retire due to age. He was so kind. Then a few weeks with Othmer method, and it helped. I have severe trauma.
Yeah.
Well, Pam, glad you're getting help or have had help here. Neuroptimal was Radar's introduction to neurofeedback. It cured chronic head pressure in 3 sessions. I almost wonder if that's related to a migraine style issue, Joshua, because I think Neuroptimal does the temples, and that can be related, I guess. But you know better than I there.
I can't really get a bead on like what Neuroptimal is really good at and not. Like I just don't know. It seems to be all over the board. I get clients that you think, oh, it'll never work on this case, and then it does, and then it's like massive improvement. You're like, what?
Wow.
and then another client where you're like, I think I've seen it work on this kind of client before, and then it doesn't. And I have no like, and their answer is, oh, you just got to do more of it. It's like, yeah, okay, I don't like that answer because I can use my clinical system and I can get there a lot faster. So I don't know what it, as Radar says, what does it do? I don't even know. I have theories, but I think I get in trouble if I said them. So I don't say them. I don't know what it does.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what it does.
Go for it. Yeah.
What I have heard is, at least an early model, and this is from a very reliable source, it was basically a broadband inhibit, like 1 to 40 down kind of idea there.
Squash.
Squash. So anyway, I don't know if it still does that. It wouldn't surprise me. But she said, Pam J said she found someone that trained with Seaburn for a while, has not had a chance to try it. That's alpha down, right? First was music only. Yeah, I've heard she does both down and up. First was music only, other 2 was watching video. Yeah, so and I'll put in my 2 cents. I think almost any kind of reward can work with a lot of individuals. I don't want to say everybody, but I've seen and I mean, Dr. Hill, when he does his podcast, he'll be training while he's doing the podcast, and you hear the chimes, the Josh's, the tones in the background. And I know a clinician, he says he does his EEG analyses while he's training himself. Sure. So I think and I've seen his maps. He's shown me his, and they've changed. But obviously there's exceptions to everything. So do what works. And
if you're training top of the head, you can kind of get away with talking a little bit, but I wouldn't let my clients do it. It's always debatable how much you can get away with.
I hear you.
Alpha Down, invented by Ruth Lanius. I think she's definitely getting the credit for it, whether she invented it or not. And I think she deserves the credit.
PTSD with Ruth?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
data on that is phenomenal, Ash, Radar. It's really, I've been trying to accrue all of Lanius's research and get a database of it. It's more than you think. Like she's published so much on this in just the last 5 years, not even that long. It's like 25 studies or something. It's just obscene how much she's published. And the research is so much better than anything I've seen on trauma anywhere. It's I'm surprised we didn't make it into the AAPB efficacy manual. I think it was just a little late for the game. Or maybe we haven't done the meta-analysis, but there's enough studies we are going to get there. And I will be shocked if it's not a 5 because the results are just incredible. And I do think that leaves just amazing hope for trauma. I do think I would add my 2 cents, which is just an opinion, but you want your clients to be wanting and desiring of self-compassion before they start. It's not common for people to be opposed to self-compassion, but an opposition to self-compassion is not going to allow them to unconsciously have the appropriate progression that is required. It's an unconscious process that the alpha down will kind of naturally carry them. You know.
Yeah.
And you just want that psychotherapy check on, like, hey, we got to check in on self-compassion. Are you able? Are you at least willing to be that? To be? Do you want to? You really want them to have a desire to have self-compassion. They don't have to be able to do it, but they have to want. They want to have the desire to have self-compassion. And sometimes I'm a good trauma therapist. I've been doing trauma work for almost 20 years now. I can meet with them 4 or 5 times, generally recruit them to that thinking and get them started.
Wow, good.
And then the people who don't do as well are the ones that have unstable issues like migraineurs, history of epilepsy, that kind of thing.
Okay, Pam J says Neurooptimal helped her sleep better. I would wake up at night, have light sleep. Now I sleep like a rock. I do. That was the first I heard about Neurooptimal, was it helped an individual with their insomnia about 50%. It didn't completely correct it, and they've done 2 full courses of treatment, but it does help them. Speaking of, I think Neurooptimal is done at the temples, and a friend gets incredible mileage out of doing SMR at the temples, actually, at T3 and T4. If their sleep ever goes out of whack, they will do SMR and a broadband inhibit at the temples, and it will get right back up their sleep score the night of. So I don't know if there's any connection or if Josh has heard anything like that.
Yeah, I try to stay out of the dialogue of what Neurooptimal is, and I'm just trying to keep drama free, because I know doing a study on it is enough drama. Like, I don't need to add to the drama.
That's wise. Yeah.
And trust me, it's plenty of drama. You don't even know.
Wow. Sounds interesting.
The stories I could tell, but I won't. I'll just keep it in my grave because I don't like drama.
Okay,
But the stories
C3,
I
C4.
could
Okay,
tell.
go on.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Anthony, yeah. So C3, C4, Radar's correct. It's C3, C4.
I gotcha.
And it's not seemingly giving you like this constant feedback experience. It's really giving you something that almost feels, I don't know if it is this at all, but you're getting these like orienting like prompts. You're probably old enough to remember when you were young and you had your first car had a CD player, and if you had a speed bump, that CD player would skip. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
it'll give those in the middle of music, those skips, and that's the feedback.
Wow.
And so there's all kinds of like, it's trying. I always wondered, I'll say what I wonder. I don't know if this is true. That's the disclaimer. I always wondered if it's giving you orienting prompts to state transitions.
Okay, and a state transition in the EEG would be defined as becoming into an alpha state or something like that?
Potentially, yeah, that could be true. But yeah, between either the triple network theory or between gamma, infralow, and cortical, I'm not sure which, but it's recording all of those. So I don't know. The answer is not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Anthony, you want to tell your friend's protocols there?
Yeah, I answered him in the chat, but basically, They're only doing T3 and T4. And when they do I mean, they'll show me their sleep scores, and it is pronounced improvement in sleep scores the night of, and it's pretty durable, with the exception. You know what else is interesting about it is, they cannot do SMR at CZ, or if they may have been able to at one time, they said, but ever since they began thyroid medication, they cannot do SMR at TZ, but they can do it at the temples, which I guess is technically maybe is not SMR even, so according to Jay. But yeah,
that's interesting. So here's the thing: have you ever run that one by Jay?
Not yet. It's new. That maybe I will. Go on.
So the reason why is because I have a sneaky suspicion that the thyroid medication will shift the frequency range.
That's what I'm thinking too.
You have to shift with it.
Go on.
But I would check with someone smarter than me. So now I would think that if they were low and they added thyroid, that things are likely going to speed up. Now, but I would also want to make sure, does the arousal match that? Does training them feel like we're training too low? And I would hope that would match up before I'd make that adjustment.
Well, their sleep is shortened if they do SMR at CZ now. So I don't know if that's too low or high according.
That does fit.
So their SMR frequency may be higher now, you think?
Yes.
That's interesting. Maybe I can let them know.
Assumption. Yeah.
and
I do make adjustments in my clinic. You go ahead.
The adjustments you said. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Pam says, should I be quiet and not talk while training? And then she just adds, I read Seburn's book and watched her and Lanius, I guess, on NeuroNoodle. So thanks for your knowledge, she says. Thank you, Pam. Go on, Joshua, if you know the answer to this.
If that's what you meant.
As a general rule, I like to tell my staff that we do not know when a client doesn't learn well from neurofeedback. We don't know what would have mattered and what would have made the difference. I do see kids who are very low functioning. They're bouncing off the chair. They're kind of almost wrestling with the sensors. And after 6 or 7 or 8 sessions, they start to calm down and they start to settle in the chair and the treatment starts to work better. And it's like, man, that calmed them down. And that the parents were saying, yeah, we noticed after 2 or 3, it started calming them down at home. And I was like, dude, we were looking at like pure artifact. I don't know how we got anything through. So you get this like impression anecdotally that you can train through anything. But then you also get clients that you tried really hard and it didn't seem to work. And it's like, well, maybe if I was more careful with that client, what if I had a neck pillow? What if I gave them better coaching? What if I had better filters? What if I had it better optimized? And all those things, which are skills, could have increased the chances that they would have been a learner instead of a non-learner with that protocol.
Okay.
And you don't know when it would matter or make the difference, but it might. And so it depends on how sensitive you are, and it depends how seriously you want to take it. I know that people pay me a lot of cash, and I want to take it really seriously. Does that make sense? When I'm training myself, I want to take myself really seriously. I get really concerned about whether or not it's going to work for me. I don't have a lot of time.
I think it's very noble. You have a noble adherence to truth, or a valuing of truth there. So that's good. Pam mentioned that Neuroptimal did help her, but not as much as Sturman and Othmer. So that's interesting,
We brought up Lanius, and it just she's pretty big into PTSD and neurofeedback. Why is it so successful? Joshua, you're a veteran. Thank you for your service again. Why is neurofeedback so good for PTSD?
Because PTSD is a disruption of a natural system, and it's actually pretty easy to disrupt disruption if you know how to.
Okay. To almost provide order again or something, maybe?
No, it's simpler than that. Simpler than that. You are disordering disorder to fix it.
Okay.
So your system knows how to do good. It's just stuck. It's pretty easy to unstick something if you have a hammer. Okay?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is what we've been doing wrong for decades, and we've had Gulf War syndrome and shell shock syndrome and post-traumatic stress syndrome and post-traumatic stress disorder and all these different iterations from all these different wars with all these different names for it. It's the same thing. We have not figured out exactly where to hit to disrupt disruption. There's a disruption in a natural process. The dam or the river is dammed. The river's blocked for a natural rhythm, and we didn't know where to disrupt this blockage. And we figured it out. That's all. And so once you figure it out, the efficacy for the research goes way up. That's fantastic. It's still hard for people who have instabilities. They take 3-4 times longer in therapy. They take 3-4 times longer in neurofeedback. That being said, we still get them through. They just need a lot more sessions. And Ruth Lanius said that herself in one of her lectures, that the 15-20% that we're not getting through in 30 sessions, they just need more sessions. And they were the unstable phenotypes. They had a history of epilepsy, they had a history of migraines, they had a history of head injuries, something like that. And if you do brain maps, you will see usually focal slowing or bilateral sharp slow transients. And you're just seeing that phenotype is what's driving this difficult progress for them. But it's generally pretty easy work, which is weird. PTSD is actually so much different now that we have these protocols that I'm in the process of actually splitting my company in two. And we're going to make half of it a nonprofit and just put all the PTSD clients in the nonprofit program. And what we're going to do is we're going to take Lanius's research and put it on charts and graphs on the website. And what we're going to do is we're going to take charts and graphs that are going to be informed by like Google Sheets. And we're going to use webhooks to have real-time results in our clinic right next to Lanius's research. So we can show that our clinic is getting the same data. Then we're going to fundraise for the cost. And I think it would be pretty hard to fail.
That's incredible.
Sell that. I'm pretty charismatic when I believe in something. I believe in that. And I know that we're getting the same good results. I sometimes sit down and do audits, and I know that we're getting research level results in our clinic. The clients are very, very happy and very positive outcomes. So,
and that's Ruth is Canada, but even in the USA, the vets are using neurofeedback, aren't they, Joshua?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of dialogue between me and different VA administrators. There's a lot of changeover regularly for just bureaucratic reasons. And so you'll talk to people, even in Kaiser. I get a lot of conversation with Kaiser Permanente. I was actually slated to go meet with the Northwest director of Kaiser Permanente in March of 2020. That did not happen because of COVID. So there's a lot of systems that they try to create these dialogues and these tractions, and you'll get people that's really excited, in the VA, and for various reasons, that process gets interrupted, or they do build a contract and the contract goes for a little while and then it gets disrupted for some other reason. There's just always a lot of hands in the pot and a lot of people that have the ability to disrupt it for a lot of reasons. But
is the VA doing neurofeedback, Joshua?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I would say that Jay's had a lot of contracts over the year. I could say every single one of my mentors has had a lot of contracts with the VA over the years. Dr. Lisa Black, who was my first mentor, she had lots of contracts with the VA. They forget to pay you sometimes. But they'll give you contracts. Yeah.
But that data, can we have access to the? I mean, take the identifying stuff out, but the results. Is there anything we can do with that?
Jay's published stuff from his VA work. That's why we don't do coma work anymore.
No, what I'm saying is you're putting Ruth Lanius's research up. Is there anything from the government? I would think our government would have more than Canada's, except they're paying more for healthcare there. I don't know.
Yeah. Give me another 2 weeks. I'll have something interesting.
All right, fine.
I'll tell you, give me 2 weeks. I will have something interesting that you will not expect to give you. It's a little early for me to give it to you right now. It's not ready. Maybe I'll save it for you instead of announce it anywhere else. I have a project.
You got a project? Okay.
It has to do with this topic.
That's cool.
Yeah.
No,
Anthony,
that sounds like
something
what's up?
I would like to do
Nothing.
something.
Well, Anthony, you seem pretty focused. What's up?
I was actually reading someone's brain map and comparing it to some of the stuff Joshua was saying there. Well, the real reason I was speaking up is I've known some individuals who have done Ruth's Alpha Down, and
Yeah.
it did not sit well with them, unfortunately.
Really?
I have not personally seen the success with it yet, and that doesn't mean I doubt it, but I'm trying to figure out what the distinction, what determines
I'm
whether
really
someone,
curious what they observed, because we've really tuned our systems in for it, and I wonder if it's the tuning of our systems, or because I don't know. Because
it
for
was their
example, I've used
symptoms. Yeah.
their symptoms. So tell me more about that, because I have
They
thoughts.
were in extreme, they did a minute of it and they were in extreme fight or flight for at least 2 days. I mean,
Were
it
they
was
male or female?
both female.
Both female. Interesting.
Yeah. Hmm.
Fight or flight. Were they? Is there any chance that they were currently living in a situation that was still arguably traumatic? Because Lanius
One of
herself
them
has used her
not
plan.
outwardly so. I mean, there I feel like that's a little bit relative. Difficult relationship, but nothing
Sometimes things can be worse than they appear, because people
yeah,
can be in highly,
subjective.
highly codependent relationships and they don't see that as a
Yeah.
big bad thing, but it really is. And let me give you an example.
Hmm.
And sometimes as a
Okay.
therapist, I can put this out very quickly. So it could be why we're not seeing this kind of drama, is because I'll suss it out quickly and I'll be like, no, you're not ready.
Mm.
When Ruth Lanius, she did a study, I believe this is correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone can correct it if it's wrong or comment on it if it's wrong. But I believe
Okay.
early on in her career, she went to Afghanistan and did alpha theta on soldiers who were still deployed. And the
Okay.
outcome was that they got PTSD immediately. Usually soldiers do not get PTSD until they get home, and they're home for 6 weeks to
Yeah.
6 months. And then the symptoms show up after they've been safe
Hmm.
and calm for 6 weeks to 6 months. If they have some stressor,
Hmm.
like they come home to a divorce, it'll get delayed even further. Okay. If they come home to some large stressors, it just gets pushed out. Cortisol delays the process.
Hmm.
But the alpha theta started the process early. And you can think of it like alpha training makes you present. So
Hmm.
think about what's going on in the present. Do you have lots of
Yeah.
unresolved problems right now? And if you do,
Yeah.
that could
Hmm.
cause some problems, to be hyper present with things that
Hmm.
you don't have the skills to solve.
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah,
thought.
I'm open to it. I
Mhm.
could go either way on it. Maybe one
Yeah.
case was like that, one wasn't a little, you know what
Okay.
I mean? So
Yeah.
there could be a range of, I
Yeah.
could see there being a range of responses, even to the alpha training at PZ.
Mhm. Yes.
But I am curious if we ever, and I will remember that
Okay.
going forward. Pam wants to speak to. She says, Joshua, thanks. I have CPTSD. I guess that's complex PTSD. I
Yeah.
need more neurofeedback and therapy to help guide me. I move through the
Mhm.
world in a new way. Remove the fear. Your world opens up. Yeah, so that's interesting. I do
Yeah.
want to. This does remind me a little bit, and this is not necessarily what Josh was saying, but I do want to
Mhm.
say I hear a lot of response from people on the internet, at least, that they started having side effects from neurofeedback, and their
Mhm.
therapist, a common go-to, and others on the internet is, well, that's just your trauma resurfacing. And I'm not ready to
Mhm.
say that. I do think there could be unintended
Yeah.
physiological side effects to neurofeedback if it's the wrong training for you, or maybe even we don't know why.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah. um
Well, and I think that,
mm,
if we do neurofeedback without a brain map, we get no real alibi in that. Like, or if we're bad at brain mapping, we don't have much of an alibi in
yeah.
that, because
Hmm.
it's like, okay, we would see that in this alpha asymmetry into the right temporoparietal domain over here if there was
Okay.
unprocessed trauma. And so, like, did you see that before you
Hmm.
started? Did you talk to the client about that? Did you get informed consent so they knew that there was this
Yeah.
thing that you might perturb and might stir up? Because that's all the things we would do at a healthy clinic, I would think. Now, I have to thank the
Gotcha.
people who came before me who figured all that out. Jeez. But
Yeah.
maybe
The hard
maybe
way.
like, well, I do look at side effect cases. I've had a number of them come from other clinics. And
Sure.
it's usually, they'll get said, oh, it's your trauma stirring up. Usually it's like Lyme disease or mycotoxins, like mold poisoning, or I think I had one heavy metal case. So it's usually some global health dysfunction.
Okay,
Metallica.
so other things to keep in mind there.
Is
Yeah.
AT and PZ known for being particularly bad? It depends, Radar.
And Amy asked about that. Well, Amy cites
Yeah.
he's responding to Amy, who said, please no alpha theta at PZ. And so
Yeah.
Radar, I think, is responding to that.
Yeah. I say that there's lots of people that I will look at their brain map and go, you know what, we want to do a trauma protocol, but we're not going to do alpha theta because there's theta content, not theta, but theta content in the back of the head that's going to muddle that alpha theta training. And so we're not going to do alpha theta where theta content could basically confuse the training. You know, and there's lots of different theta content that isn't natural theta EEG signal, but something negative, some failure mode. And you don't really want to train up something that is a failure mode, even on accident. It's not likely to happen with alpha theta, but it can be some of the reasons why people have more dramatic negative reactions. So yeah,
Well,
and you can see who those are going to be. Like, you don't have to be guessing. You can look at somebody's brain map and go like, alpha theta is great for this person, and be very, very safe.
What are we going to ask Jay about in tomorrow's show, guys?
You should ask him about being facetious. Ask about RFK Jr. No, just teasing.
Oh boy,
just teasing. Don't do it.
he'll be there all day.
Yeah.
Try the veal.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, perhaps the audience could chime in. What have we talked about today? We've talked about neurooptimal and alpha theta. We just discussed, and my scroll is not working. One sec.
Hold on, Radar. What question? I left you hanging? That can't be the case.
Oh.
Now, if you're talking about the questions from last week's Q&A, that show will go out tomorrow about 2 o'clock Central. So if that's what you're talking about, Radar, is there another question?
There was one other question about did Lanius give, I believe it was Lanius, soldiers PTSD? And the answer is no. We are primed for PTSD, at least in the way that we colloquially refer to it, and that we don't get the symptoms of it until after we calm down. Cortisol blocks the processing and even blocks the side effects. The side effects from PTSD come from your brain trying to undo this kind of blockage, for lack of a better term. And I could describe that better if I took half a minute and thought about it. But this kind of dynamic where the brain is not processing something like short-term and long-term memory because of stress hormones, and that they're so distressing in an acute way that if your brain tries to process this short-term and long-term integration, it produces enough cortisol to block the process itself. And so now it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is how it becomes a disorder. Something like that is true. Now, what happened was that process was already true, but they were using that cortisol and they were in a high cortisol state already. And so they weren't presenting with symptoms. And so she didn't cause it. She didn't give it to them. She just made them calmer and more present. And so they expressed it. May not have been ideal timing. At least that's. But again, I might be muddling some of the details, so I could be wrong. I apologize. Please correct me if I am.
Anthony, let's handle Amy and we'll split.
Well, Amy's asking, thank you, Amy, is trauma located between PZ and OZ? I will tell you that Jay, as well as the bulk of the research that I have found, says that trauma is really, and Josh spoke to this earlier, it's really an alpha asymmetry, or it's elevated alpha tends to be behind the right ear, which is known as T6, but it's also known as P4 and P8. Sometimes they're kind of conflated in the research, but it's all kind of that right parietal area. Amy. So in a way, that is the most predictive of PTSD symptoms in the EEG in the research that I am aware of. So then I can let Josh address that as well.
Well, I'll put the citation because I like to do that whenever I can.
Yeah, great.
Here,
Thank you.
Is it 10 years old?
Oh, you heard that?
I think it's actually 2017.
Pete saw that. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Let's see. I'll put it right here. Let's see here. I'll put it in the chat if I can find it. 2019. Okay, here we go. So here's in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. This comment failed to post because it's got a hyperlink.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't post, but I think Pete has had success. I don't have.
No, it only takes a certain amount of text. Just post the rest of it in the second one.
There, I'll try again too.
There we go. So I managed to post. I took the hyperlink out and I put it in there. So this is the study about how the alpha asymmetry in the T6 P4 region is essentially an electrical signal highly correlated with post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's great. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, it's very useful. Published in Frontiers in Psychiatry, which is a high-impact, relevant journal. No one's going to criticize it.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Never say never. Anthony, what's the name of your Facebook technology group?
Science and Technology Discoveries. So, yeah, and I just want to say to Amy, now, Amy, that does not mean that, your symptoms aren't valid or anything you're experiencing is not valid. If that's not your pattern, that's just the most correlated one. And maybe Jay can talk to that. Thank you for...
There's also rare cases where people have the gene 4 expression and that network is missing. But you're still going to have the symptoms from it just because you can't see the network. So that's a rare example.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Amy said that her alpha asymmetry moved from the left to the right, or her alpha asymmetry moved to the right after she did alpha theta going wrong at PZ. So she feels, I think she's trying to say she feels a little bit traumatized by the alpha theta. I have heard of clinicians say he doesn't like to do alpha theta unless they're sleeping well, and generally he means a full course of SMR. So that's something. And actually, so trauma is processed in our sleep, supposedly, Amy. So who knows if that, I'd be curious how you're sleeping is maybe a way. But I know Pete's probably trying to sign off here, so maybe we can continue talking another time, Amy.
Great. Now I'm going to have another dream of waking up in class without my clothes on. I didn't study for my midterm. Joshua, where can we get your book?
Amazon. I put it as cheap as it would let me, so I apologize that it's $21. I wish it was cheaper. The Kindle version is $2.99, and that's the cheapest it would let me as well. It's
what's the name of the book?
Yeah, Neurofeedback for All by Joshua Moore. If I could make it cheaper, I would. So
will you stop doing that? It's make it 50.
Well, it's just my I want it to be something that the community can enjoy and benefit, and I want it to be an easy technical read, which is a weird thing to want to do, but that's what I was going for, an easy technical read.
And the Audible book will be coming out soon?
Only if you read it.
So you got to go 2-3 inches over.
Oh, no. I don't think it would do a well audiobook. There's too many pictures. The thing about it is that it's got tons of illustrations and pictures and diagrams, and that's what's good about it. So it would be a terrible audiobook.
Well, Joshua, Anthony, Amy, Radar, everybody, Pam, thanks for showing up, asking great questions, and hopefully we'll get them all answered in the next show. See you in a week, boys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Smell you later.
Let's see here.